Okay, wonderful. I believe that we are live now.
Great.
Neat. Okay, so thank you both so much for being here. Today I am joined by Edward Power and Craig Gordon, who are going to be chatting with us about their exciting and chilling book, Dragons in the Snow, Avalanche Detectives and the Race to Beat Death in the Mountains. Ed Power is a journalist and an avid skier, and Craig Gordon is a professional avalanche forecaster. And before I turn the time over to the two of them, I just wanted to go over a few of the upcoming events at our bookstore. The second and fourth Wednesday of every month, we do our virtual Lit Knit, which is what it sounds like. You get crafty and chatty. It's always really fun. And our next one is October 14th. You can find more information about that on our Facebook page or our website. And then throughout the rest of the month, there are a few of events that we're doing in conjunction with the Utah Humanities Book Festival. On October 19th, Sahar Mustafa will be talking about her book, The Beauty of Your Face. On October 20th, we have Gerald Elias talking about the Beethoven sequence. And on October 21st, we are hosting a poetry reading with Linda Hogan and Paisley Reckel. And then really quick, I just like to say, if you enjoy our conversation, please consider supporting Ed Power and Craig Gordon by buying a copy of their book. And please consider supporting the bookstore by buying it through us. You can buy this book through our website at wellerbookworks.com, over the phone at 801-328-2586, or in store at Trolley Square. And with that being said, I am going to turn off my camera and turn the time over to them. They're going to give us a little presentation, and when it's over, we'll have a Q&A. So if you have any questions for Ed or Craig, please leave them down below and we'll get to them. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Salem. We appreciate it. As Salem Rogers just said, I'm Edward Power, author of Dragons in the Snow, Avalanche Detectives, and the Race to Beat Death in the Mountains. I want to thank Weller Books for hosting us today, and particularly Catherine Weller and Lane Richens and Salem Rogers, who supported us for this event today. The book, as Salem said, came out actually September 1st. It was published by Mountaineers Books in Seattle. And today I'm coming to you from the Ogden Valley, which is about an hour north of Salt Lake City. Many of you know the area. And there's two great ski areas here, Snow Basin and Powder Mountain. And I'm here with Craig Gordon, as Salem said. Craig's with the Utah Avalanche Center. I'll let him tell you a little bit about his background.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. And like Ed said, we're in the beautiful Ogden Valley. Fortunately, getting out of a little bit of the smoke, getting out of Smoke Lake City for a minute or two. And yeah, I'm Craig Gordon. I'm one of the forecasters with the Utah Avalanche Center. Actually, I've been involved in snow and avalanches for about the past 35 years, and I got the opportunity to meet Ed. We're going to go into this a little bit more in depth, but we met at an avalanche awareness class just down the road here at Snow Basin. And that's when we made this connection. And that's when we realized, man, we had some substance here. We had a great connection, soul surfers. And yeah, we were able to put some fun things together, as well as some serious and some poignant points as well. And that's what crafted the book. Here's a large version right behind us, but that's what crafted this. And it's an awesome read.
Thanks, Craig. I want to start with a little bit of a disclosure. I'm not an avalanche expert. In writing the book, I certainly had to become a student of avalanche science and backcountry techniques, and got into it some myself. But to be a true expert, you have to not just go about the education piece, but you also have to learn the backcountry techniques and spend a lot of time in the backcountry. And that could be literally, certainly many, many months, and literally probably years. But how did this book come to be? I was living in Virginia for most of my career, for 30 years plus. But my wife and I are avid skiers, and our sons are snowboarders. And in 2004, we built a home here in the Ogden Valley. And so we visited Utah many, many times and grew to love this place. January 2016, our sons had grown up, moved away, and my wife and I decided to move full time here. And in those first few weeks of living here in the Ogden Valley, we had also bought season ski passes to the ski resorts here. So we were heading up into the mountains more and more than we'd ever imagined, really. So in the mornings, I was hearing all this avalanche bombing going off. It was a winter of good snow. And I had never been struck so profoundly by how much of it there was going on. And so I began to wonder about what's it like up there? Who are the people doing this work? And what's the work like? And so I started thinking, I need to learn more about this. I was a newspaper reporter and an editor and a publisher, and by nature, I'm a curious person, and by profession, I'm a curious person. So it really sort of got a hold of me, and I thought, well, I need to take an avalanche awareness course and learn more about this, and that led to my taking the course that Craig mentioned. I also brought with me a lifelong love of what some people think of as adrenaline sports, which is surfing and skiing. And so I had a lot of knowledge about those things. And obviously at least certainly the skiing piece was intertwined with my desire to learn more about avalanches in the mountains. And Craig talked a little bit about his career at the Utah Avalanche Center and Brighton at ski resort as a patroller and avalanche mitigator, and also his heliski experience. So in January 2017, I was taking the course the first night with Craig, and he was about 10 or 15 minutes late to the start of the course because he had been up in the mountains investigating an avalanche in which two snowboarders had been caught. And so I was right away fascinated by him. He walked into the classroom wearing his ski bibs and his, avalanche transceiver, and Craig's, larger than life kind of guy. And so I was immediately struck by it, and I had started to think that I wanted to find a writing project of some kind, going back to my first love in journalism. And so it turned out that right about that same time, a storm had been forming in the Gulf of Alaska around January 5th, 2017. And the storm ended up building and building and building. And by the time it hit the California coast and the Sierras, it dumped almost 20 feet of snow. And then it headed for the Uinta range here in Utah and the Wasatch. And at that time, at literally the day that it was mainly hitting the Utah mountains, which was January 11th, 2017, a group of 9 snowboarders were headed into the backcountry on a snowcat in this raging blizzard. And that was the one that Craig ended up doing a forecast about. I'll let him talk about that.
Yeah, so my job as an avalanche forecaster, try to get the information out to people who are recreating in the backcountry, whether they're skiing or boarding or snowmobiling, hunting, hiking. No matter what we're doing in the backcountry, you kind of have to have a little bit of knowing what the rules of the road are, knowing the kind of terrain that you should avoid for the day, but also you want to know the kind of terrain that's going to be safe to ride. So we help to give that information out to the public. And also part of that job is also educating the public. So those could be avalanche awareness classes, or those could be like a class that Ed and I met at where you're on the snow, you're getting to see the different layers, you're learning how to move around in terrain. So that's kind of the general umbrella of what I do as a forecaster. So this storm in particular is super interesting because it's this big juicy storm. It's got lots of cold air involved in it. It's generating, part of it is down around the Hawaiian Islands. So a portion of this is a Pineapple Express. It's a big fire hose of moisture, and that's colliding with really cold air. So you can see the setup, right? Cold air, warm air, kaboom. Wherever that thing lands, man, it is just gonna pace the range. It started off in the Sierras, moves inland, and then eventually hits the mountains of Utah and just plasters the mountains with dense, heavy snow. That unto itself might sound like, man, this is, backcountry riders' paradise. The problem with that setup is that all of that heavy, dense snow is accompanied by strong ridgetop winds. Well, that's landing on loose, sugary snow. So the structural base to begin with is inherently dangerous. And I like to think of these weak layers kind of like dominoes. So they're sticking up like this. And all is good if we slowly load those dominoes up, but a rapid load, and then especially us coming along, tipping all of those dominoes over, that strong slab that's on top shatters like a pane of glass, and now we're staring down the barrel of a really dangerous avalanche. So we've got this entire setup just waiting for one of us to come along, knock the legs out from underneath us. And that's really the basis and the genesis of where this story starts.
So on the morning of January 11th, you issued a forecast that said,
yeah, it's high danger. We're bordering on extreme. And 20 years of doing this is like the only second time I've ever issued an extreme avalanche danger. That means, man, the walls are coming down around us. Does it mean you can't ride? No. But you have to avoid the kinds of slopes where what we call the avalanche dragon, where the avalanche dragon is living. Those were upper elevation slopes, especially the ones that were facing the north half of the compass. Now, snow is extremely complex, and you could ride some low angle slopes and be good to go and think, hey man, it's green light. Yeah, I know it's dumping, but I'm having the day of my life. All we got to do is just sort of tickle the belly of the beast, wake one of these weak layers up, and now, man, it is just lights out, it's game on, and it's a super dangerous combination.
and so Craig's forecast came out about 4 a.m. that morning, and the snowboarders were in the snowcat, headed out into the Uinta range while this just blizzard was raging. And they mostly stuck to mid-mountain terrain as the day went on. But later in the afternoon, they just couldn't help themselves and decided that they needed to go up higher. And they got up to a peak on a mountain in the Uintas. And so they got up there, and two snowboarders decided to.
You're calling in right now as we speak.
Two snowboarders decided to drop in from the peak of that mountain, and they triggered an avalanche and swept them both down the mountain. One was slammed into some trees, broke both his legs. Another one was completely buried and barely survived that. He was actually under the snow for about 12 minutes, which is a long time. Roughly 10 minutes is thought to be a sort of a target for if you're below the snow much longer than that, you're going to face the unlikelihood of surviving. So as they headed out of the Uintas, rescuing these two snowboarders and getting them back onto the snowcat, they got within about a couple hours of where the trailhead was in their cars, and snowcat broke down. And by this point, it's about 8, 9 o'clock at night. In the mountains, the temperature's dropping, the snow's still coming down. So two snowboarders decided to hike out to the cars and get cell service in a nearby town and call in Summit County Rescue. And in Utah, at least certainly in the Salt Lake area, when these types of notifications go out about a rescue taking shape, the notifications are heard by all kinds of first responders. And there was a helicopter that had just dropped off a child at the Children's Hospital in Salt Lake, and they picked up on the notification, and they decided to fly in and see what they could do. And so I'm going to read you a short excerpt about that from the book. The life flight crew decides to fly in over the Uintas and see what the situation looks like from the air. An Augusta Grand 109, the chopper is designed for high altitude flight, originally built for rescues in the Swiss Alps. It bears a collision avoidance system for navigating above mountains, a bundle of highway in the sky piloting instrumentation that guides pilots in low or zero visibility. Even inside the snowcat, Jeremy Jones, who was one of the snowboarders that was injured, and his companions hear the distinct twin turbine sound of the heli coming in over the Uinta range. When it grows closer, they realize it must be part of the rescue operation. The heli eventually hovers above the clearing and disabled cat. From its underbelly, a powerful searchlight pierces the falling snow and illuminates the ground below, like the accident scene it is. Then the heli drifts down toward the clearing. Within minutes, the heli crew is inside the snowcat with a backboard. Two men and a woman question Jones about his condition, and he offers a laconic, "I'm good." The woman inserts an IV into his arm. She tells Jones she will give him an injection to kill pain and knock him out during the flight to the hospital. Once airborne, the life flight heli crew finds the weather deteriorating. The snowstorm's full rage has come back as if to wield its final vengeance. All ground reference has been lost, and the crew is put into a 20-minute holding pattern. Soon, one of the crew spots the bare, distant headlights of a vehicle weaving its way through nearby Provo Canyon. They track the vehicle's progress, knowing it will eventually lead them near Timpanogos Regional Hospital in Orem. So, as Craig talked about some of the work that he does in the backcountry, investigating, not only issuing avalanche advisories in the morning, usually getting very early in the morning to do that, and then going back into the backcountry a lot himself. There's a lot of good things about what he does, and he'll talk more about that in a bit in terms of the getting into the backcountry, but obviously lots of investigations into accidents, whether they involve injuries or deaths in too many cases. I also wanted to note that in the book, I cover a lot of topics that are around the subject matter, not just stories, dramatic retellings of avalanche accidents. I get into snow science and what that looks like, what it's like to be caught under an avalanche, and what the process is for the body reacting to that with the lack of oxygen and freezing starting to set in. So I go through that process in the book, the sort of the medical piece of that, about avalanche awareness training and how important that is to people to get it. And then also necessary gear that people take into the backcountry, a shovel, probe pole, avalanche beacon for locating a partner who may have been covered up. And then some newer technology that's come about, such as a avalanche rescue backpack that was developed by Black Diamond Equipment Company here in Salt Lake City. It's called the Jet Force, and it was the design of this particular backpack was a revolutionary thing. And the story ended up being a great one of American invention, and I loved going and meeting with those engineers and hearing about how the various things they had to do and prove about that technology to make it work. So that's another piece of the book. But I also wanted to convey to the reader the sense of joy of skiing in the backcountry, because if you're out there on a sunny day after fresh snow, there's probably no more beautiful thing on earth. It's really, really a beautiful place to be. It's wilderness. It's wild. It feels wild, and it feels way away from civilization. So I was able to go out on a day with Park City Powder Cats and a ski guide named Shannon Finch. And I wanted to read just a brief excerpt from the book about my experience that day with Shannon. The late novelist James Salter, in an essay titled The Skier's Life, observed that skiing, like dancing, seeks to be admired. The catch, as he astutely observed, is that just when you feel your skis getting dialed into the snow, when the turns seem to instinctively find a groove for themselves, you see someone off to the side, performing turns of eternal grace, and realize he or she is, as Salter put it, the skier you will never be. So that's always a challenge out there whenever you're skiing, whether it's in a resort or in the backcountry, is trying to get better at it and seeing people doing it just so amazingly beautifully. So I was with Shannon, and the snowcat took us up to a ridge line high above a big bowl in the Uinta range. This place is called Thousand Peaks Ranch, spectacularly beautiful. And Shannon and I got up to the ridge line together and took a few seconds to kind of get ourselves together. And then we both dropped in together. And this is what I wrote about it. Immediately, I found rhythm in my turns, my poles plants, soft jabs, my knees connecting with the jackrabbit bounce that fed off the trampoline snap of the snow. Turn after turn, I shed my deliberations with my skis and fell into a kind of meditative state where speed and just the tiniest increments of effort, more like thoughts than muscle, governed direction changes. As I finished every turn, I could see out of the corner of my uphill eye the shadow of the rooster tail of snow flung into the air by the tails of my skis. As if in slow motion, the snow was landing with its own subtle hush, as if each flake was like a fingertip on the earth. a slow white narcosis enveloping the mountain behind me. And then it was another beautiful thing that happened toward late in the afternoon. We were on another ridgeline, on another peak, and the sun was starting to go down. And we were with two guides, Shannon and another one, and he asked her if she would drop in and do what they call a ski cut, which is to test the snow on the slope, because it was pretty steep, to see if there was any possibility of it avalanching. And so I was standing there on the ridgeline, and I watched her as she dropped in to do the ski cut, and this is how I captured it in the book. It was as if she had transformed her entire physical being into that of a raptor. Slowly, beginning at 6,000 or 7,000 feet of altitude, she was in her turn earthward. Then, as her body angled sharply forward, her arms tucked in close to her ribs, as if she was folding wings back for aerodynamic perfection. Within seconds, her speed seemed to have doubled. She began to stitch a slim series of turns. From where I stood, I could see Finch's lead ski reach down the precipitous face as her knee and thigh followed in a stretch of pure physiognomic defiance. The tips of her ski poles were like claws barely piercing the air. Behind her silhouette, the afternoon sun captured each arc like advancing frames shot from a camera's motorized shutter. Click, click, click. And then far below, Shannon Finch was gone. An invisible slipstream of air molecules seemed to stir over the slope where her body had just zoomed past. I had seen her disappear faster than any wind combing the high spires of Thousand Peaks Ranch.
An amazing place, right?
So obviously that was a beautiful day and a beautiful experience for me. And it was wonderful to watch a skier like Shannon and her partner guide ski. But avalanches and deaths do happen. And one of my chapters chronicles an avalanche that happened in France in 2006, involving an American ski guide named Gary Ashurst, who lives in Sun Valley, Idaho. I had actually skied with Gary in the late 1990s in a place called Le Grave, France, which at the time was a destination for people who were serious about skiing. It's big mountain terrain. It's not a resort. There's no marked trails or anything like that. You have to ski with a knowledgeable guide. And Gary had been living there for some time and actually had been one of the few Americans to be awarded guide credentials in that country, in France. And so in 2006, this is well after I had skied with Gary, I got word that he'd been caught in an avalanche and that he had nearly died. And he was skiing with two clients that day, both from Aspen, Colorado. One was named John Siegel and the other Gary Sawyer. And I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs from that piece in the book. The men had actually left Le Grave because snow had not been falling, and they had gone to a ski area on the border of France and Italy. And they had skied over into Italy in the morning. And by the early afternoon, they decided it was time to go back into France. And so they had hiked on skins up to the top of a mountain that they were going to then ski down and bear off to the left, which would take them back into France. And so I'm just going to read you a little excerpt about what happened that day. And hopefully you'll feel like you're being put on the mountain that day and what happened. To get back into France required the men to do a 30-minute boot hike up a peak, recalls Ashurst. By early afternoon, a little before 1 p.m., they had reached a small prominence situated on the border of France and Italy. They were standing on their skis at about 7,500 feet, facing north. High enough in the sky, the sun, glancing off the new snow, warmed their backs. The actual name of the run below them was Cima de la Plaine. From there, by skiing down and to the left, they would return more deeply into the French ski area. The day stood before them like a dream. Finally, Ashurst dropped in first to test the snow and give his companions some sense of what the conditions held. He skied no more than 200 to 300 feet before stopping to the right of a stand of trees. He looked back up where Siegel and Sawyer stood in the brilliant sun, ready to begin their runs. Siegel dropped in next, and began making turns to the left of the tracks Ashurst had left. 100 feet, 4 or 5 turns into his run, Siegel saw a crack open in the snow. It was as if the entire mountain face was groaning. For a moment, Sawyer saw his friend try to ride the collapsing snow. As it sharpened to a roar and accelerated, the fragmenting snow under Siegel's feet swallowed him. Above, Sawyer watched in horror as Siegel completely disappeared. The avalanche broke like a massive wave into the stand of trees to Ashurst's left. No sign of Siegel in the white snarl, the man by now trapped under a deep mob of snow, ice, and trees. For Ashurst and Sawyer, it was as if explosives had been detonated under the snow and the entire mountainside was vaporized. In its wake, a spray of white smoke levitating like a memory in the sunlit air. So fortunately, a French gendarme in a small shack at the bottom of that run saw this happen, and he was able to quickly pick up a phone and call a helicopter rescue crew that was nearby, and they immediately got in the air and flew in. And the first thing they did was bring Ashurst up out of the snow that he was trapped in. He was not actually under the snow completely, just chest deep or so, to bring him up on a cable to the helicopter where there was a doctor. And they quickly took him to a nearby town where there was a hospital. And this is what I wrote about it. He was taken directly into surgery that lasted nearly 5 hours. His left humerus was seriously fractured, and his left brachial artery, which supplies blood to the lower arm and hand, had been severed. A special vascular surgical team had to be called in to transplant a vein from his leg to his arm to restore circulation. Had that not happened, Ashurst's left arm would have essentially died, and that would have led to amputation. Ashurst had broken ribs, and surgeons sucked 3 units of blood from his left lung. His body was bruised, but so was his ski guide's pride in protecting his clients. Once in intensive care, he kept asking hospital personnel about Siegel. Quote, "The first 2 days they told me he was in the hospital in severe condition," Ashurst remembers. "On the 3rd day, I said, 'He's dead, isn't he?' And they said, 'Yes, he's dead.'" So that is can be the tragic outcome of a ski guide's life, which Craig also, as he mentioned earlier, has done. And it's a great responsibility to be a ski guide in the world and in the backcountry. And Craig can tell you more about that. And so at that point, actually, I would like him to just talk a little bit more about how you get to be a forecaster, what it's like when you become one, and what ski guiding is like. So
yeah. Let's you know what? Let's start here. So we think of snow as this light, fluffy, in your face, beautiful white medium. But once we trigger a slide, all of that snow gets ground up, it gets compressed into a smaller area, it heats up, and then it sets up like concrete in just a second or two. So we got to remember this is a super violent event. You're going 0 to 40 or 50 miles an hour in just a matter of a couple of seconds. You can kind of see the theme here from Jeremy, who slammed through trees. They're baseball bats. You're going 30 miles an hour through baseball bats. Something is going to break, and it's not going to be the tree. It's going to be one of our limbs. And then the recent story with broken ribs and a broken humerus. So you can see that very quickly, trauma is really one of the main focuses that when we trigger a slide, we're going to get our asses handed to us, right? Yeah, we get beaten up. So about a quarter of us right out of the gates get killed by trauma. For the rest of us, maybe we've got about 10 or 15 minutes to live under the snow before we die of asphyxiation, not suffocation. There's plenty of air in the snow. We actually die from breathing in our own CO2. So those are the grim statistics. Those are the grim facts. So we can have all the rescue gear in the world that we want. We can have the best skis or best snowboard or most high-powered snowmobile. We can enjoy the backcountry every day, but the art of enjoying the backcountry is avalanche avoidance. If we've got to use any of our rescue gear, it means that we've screwed up. We've triggered the avalanche. It's kind of like driving down the freeway and getting into the accident and the airbag and the car goes off. By that time, the accident's already happened. We've got to avoid the airbag in the backcountry going off, right? So that's metaphorically speaking. So how do we get there? Well, you know, gear has gotten so good over the past decade or so. We're on fat skis, we're on burly bindings, burly boots, split boards to where you can climb uphill just like skiers, snowmobiles, they're super, super powerful. It's like any other aspect. Gear and skill set far outweighs our avalanche awareness, right? So the gear and the skill sets here and this avalanche awareness takes so long to creep up. So again, avalanche avoidance is the big ticket, but it's not all doom and gloom. Not every day is this red light, the world is collapsing, we got to hide under the beds kind of day. You can be out in the backcountry enjoying this amazing environment nearly every day. It's a matter of, though, knowing where the avalanche dragon lives and avoiding it. And, you know, we've got this great opportunity here in Utah, particularly Ed, with three amazing world-class resorts right around here in the Ogden Valley, is parlaying all the hard work that the women and men of the ski patrol, before we even get out onto the hill, they're reducing the avalanche hazard with explosives, with slope cuts, with all of the things that they use in their toolbox and in their arsenal to keep the slopes safe. So we always have that as an exit strategy. As more and more resorts are becoming busier and busier, we tend to then want to get away from that. We tend to want to get into the backcountry. So this book actually helps to show the world the hardworking women and men that are involved in this industry. So from resort personnel, ski patrol, snow safety guides, technology, rescue, and all of the players that are in this, and people who have dedicated their lives, their entire career, decades worth of experience. Myself, yeah, I've been in this for over 30 years, for 3 decades, starting out as a ski patrolman, 10 years at the Brighton Ski Resort. I was in the right place at the right time. I was able to develop my own little niche occupation there as an avalanche forecaster. That grew, and I moved over to being a helicopter ski guide for 3 years, and now the last 20 years with the Avalanche Center. As far as being a snow scientist, I'm no snow scientist. I've got an intense love for the mountains and snow, and of course, powder skiing. That's really my objective at the end of the day. I want to be out there. I want to be out there with friends like Ed and my other close friends in the backcountry. You know, you had mentioned how we feel so apart from things and kind of this wilderness setting. And it's really an amazing thing. You can be miles and miles away from any other faces or voices in a pristine backcountry area, just getting to enjoy this, getting to love this. But again, really the big wrap your brain around take home point here is that we don't want to trigger slides. We want to avoid them. We want to use all of these amazing resources that we have in our toolkit so that we can implement that mantra. And Ed, you alluded to it at the beginning, you know, avalanche education and avalanche awareness. I mean, those are the keys to the kingdom, right? Knowledge, it's powder. And it helps to get us into the backcountry. And Ed, I think you've done a beautiful job in this book, again, to help reveal all of the hard work that people put into this, you know, and really, I got to tell you, I am a little selfish. I do like to get on the snow nearly every day in the winter. So yeah, I mean, I do this because it's an amazing thing. But the most amazing thing is that I have found what I get to do. I live what I love. I love what I live. I have made it a living for the past 30 years, not only forecasting avalanches, but being able to help people out in avalanche awareness classes. Ed was part of that. And so that's really where the true passion of this is. And it's giving back to the community. And you'll see plenty of people in this really beautifully written book that are just like me and have got a lot of skin in the game.
Yep. You know, writing the book was a 3.5-year journey, and I was really thrilled to take it with Craig. And I've met a lot of snow professionals who are in the book over the course of that journey. The book is composed of a prologue and 28 chapters, so you just got a small taste of it today with the little excerpts that I read. But if you're a skier or a snowboarder or a snowmobiler, or you just love getting out in the mountains, even just cross-country skiing, I'd urge you to take a look at the book, and I hope I captured the true spirit and passion that those of us who love skiing bring to it. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Salem Rogers, and Salem's going to handle some Q&A.
Hello, I'm back.
Hi.
Yeah, thank you both so much. That was wonderful. To begin with, I have a question for Ed. So yeah, you worked really closely with Craig for 3.5 years, like you just mentioned. But you obviously, in writing this book, also spoke with a lot of other snow professionals. And the question is, was it difficult to get these people to agree to chat with you, especially because this was a project that took several years to complete?
Yeah, well, it was interesting. First of all, I owe a debt of gratitude to Craig for opening a lot of doors for me. I mean, he and I had long conversations about who would be good people for this book, and who were really experts in certain parts, like avalanche mitigation. So I went and spent some time at Alto ski area with the guy who'd been doing that for 27 years there. And so doors opened. I found these professionals amazingly welcoming to the idea of the book, because they love what they do so much, and they're so proud of what they do, as they should be. And so there was that piece. But then also, as I mentioned earlier, I was in the newspaper and media business. Part of that was 10 years as a newspaper reporter for the largest newspaper in Virginia, the Virginian Pilot, and then for the Philadelphia Inquirer in Philadelphia. And so I developed a skill set over many years that enabled me to bring that to the table when I met with these people, and really try to be, to delve deeply into what they were doing and ask the right questions. And I think they responded to that, understanding that I was really trying to get at the heart of what they do and help people understand it. And frankly, in the end, all of this was about the hope that maybe this will save some more lives in the backcountry.
Yeah, definitely. This is another question for you, Ed. See, was the process of writing this book, this is a pretty lengthy book, like you mentioned, it's 28 chapters and it has a prologue. How difficult was that to do, especially with, it taking 3.5 years?
Yeah, the book is just under 300 pages, so that your clients know. Yeah, it was a lot of reporting, which of course I had done a lot of in my career. So, but it was a lot of reporting. I mean, I was on the road a lot, going to meet with people, and going to Salt Lake a lot for various meetings. If I couldn't meet somebody on the mountain or whatever, that we would meet somewhere in Salt Lake City. So there's a lot of that. And I did a lot of reporting before I really got serious into the writing. But at some point, if you're writing a book, you've actually got to sit down and start really writing the book. And there was one moment I'll just quickly recount, where I had done about 4 or 5 months of a lot of reporting, and I went to Mexico for a few months to write. In my head, that was all I was going to do, was write.
Well, and to surf too. I mean, let's set the story straight.
A little bit. But when I got on the plane to go to Mexico, I had one of these huge mountaineering backpacks on, with 2 huge accordion files that had 28 sleeves in them, each filled with notes and transcribed interviews for each of those chapters. And then I sat down, and every day I worked for about 7 to 8 hours. And that went on for 2.5 months. And I wrote a lot of the book in that particular stretch. And then there was another one up here in Utah that was pretty similar in terms of time, 2 months to 3 months. I will say, and writers who may see this will identify with this. It was not only mentally taxing, but it was physically taxing. I mean, when you're sitting in a chair for 8 hours a day, working from notes and all that sort of thing, by the end of that process, after 2-3 months of that, you're like, this is a lot. So, but it was worth it. I'm happy with the book, and I think Mountaineers is happy with the book, and they've been extremely supportive. So yeah, happy it all turned out this way.
Great, thank you. This next question is for Craig. How can somebody that is interested in pursuing a career in avalanche forecasting begin that process? How did you get started in your career?
You know, I came from the school of hard knocks, right? So when I got into this, man, you know, kind of the pathway was you would be a ski patrol person, and you'd spend X amount of years at a resort, and you would, you know, get that place pretty dialed in, upside down, inside out, know the intricacies of it, know how storms affect that kind of terrain, know how other people that you're working with, how we could manage the terrain as a team, and then, you know, put that all together and think, well, we've got to have a 9 o'clock start time. You know, people have got to be out on the hill. So kind of coming from that background, you know, I just stretched it out, and quite frankly, it's a living where, like anything else you have a passion for, you follow your heart, you work ass off, and eventually, you know, you kind of create your own destiny, and that is very easy to do. Now, like, I do kind of kid that I came from the school of hard knocks, but at that time, you know, things were so different. So because these are really coveted jobs, I mean, they're amazing jobs, whether you're at a resort or you're a guide or you're a forecaster, in the position that I'm in now, you know, there's only X amount of people who do them, and either they retire or they die, and that opens up that slot. You know, the beauty now, though, is that one skill set that you used to need 2 or 3 decades ago of just knowing snow and knowing how to forecast that and maybe having a bit of a weather or meteorological background, well, now that has greatly expanded. And since there are so many people going into the backcountry now, you know, you need the skill set of computer skills and PowerPoint skills and presentation skills and people skills. You know, who would have thought, right? You're going to talk to people, you need people skills. Whereas 20 or 30 years ago, you could have just been a canyon hermit and say, okay, this is where we're putting our bombs this morning. This is how we're running our routes. But the world is so much bigger. And we know that just with daily events now, right? Everybody is connected. And being able to transfer and deliver that information now is at probably its most critical point as more and more people get into the backcountry. So the way you get into this, man, yeah, you definitely become focused. You follow your heart, you follow your passion. You know, the payoff with following your passion is if you truly find that and you truly define that for yourself, you never work a day in your life. And I've been really, really blessed to not only create that, but to also live that. So things have gotten so much more competitive now. Yes, now you definitely need a degree in one of the probably atmospheric sciences, geology or meteorology. And that way you become that much more of a marketable item. But you got to be the entire package now. So, you know, the days of just being able to go out and look at snow and geek out on crystals and trigger avalanches, yeah, those are no longer. You've got to be the entire package. And so much of this, though, is, you know, you can get that from schooling. You can get that mostly, though, from a great mentor. So find a great mentor, connect with that person, and, you know, one that doesn't trigger avalanches, one that avoids them. Yeah, just soak up as much as you can and then be out there in the snow. You know, get your hands cold. Spend the time, do the time, and eventually, you know what? You follow the passion, and the passion will follow you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful answer. See, this next question is for both of you, really. I really love the metaphor avalanche dragon, and I was wondering if that's a professional term or if you took a bit of poetic license with that.
Well,
yeah, I'll tell you that is kind of a professional term, and you know, the metaphor of the white dragon. You know, so you're out and you're hunting the dragon. Like if you're at a ski resort, you're a snow safety person, you're knocking avalanches down, you're out hunting the avalanche dragon. As backcountry travelers, we're avalanche avoiders. We're not hunters, right? We are avoiders because the dragon is really, really deadly. But to weave that into kind of a metaphoric type of, poetic wordsmithing like Ed did, it's kind of a fun little, play on words, because it's so deadly in some respects. It's so compelling in others, kind of sexy, right? I mean, what's this all about? So yeah.
Well, he used that metaphor the first night I was in the awareness class. During that class that night, I mean, he used it, and it struck me right away. I was like, wow, that's a powerful image. And I wasn't thinking about writing a book at that point. That happened as the weeks went on subsequent to the class. I had mentioned to him the last day of the class, which was on the mountain. I'd said at the end of the day, I said, I'm a writer, and thinking about finding a project. I said, what you do is really interesting for a profession, and there's certainly some sort of magazine article or something in there. I said, and maybe even a book. I said, but that's a different kind of beast. And so he and I met a few weeks later and talked about it. And we talked about the avalanche accident that I touched on. That's in the book, which is the beginning of the book. And I said, that sounds like the beginning to a book. And so I decided to move forward and see where it led us. But yeah, that's that. I heard it the first night I was in the class, and I thought, once I started thinking about a book, I thought that's a powerful image. That could be a great title.
There's something here, and I'll continue and come full circle with that. So really, truly, the first generation of avalanche hunters in Little Cottonwood Canyon. I mean, they wrote the proverbial book on this, and a lot of the same stuff that we use right now, just like 3-chord rock and roll, right? It started someplace, expanded. And, they talked about dragons, the avalanche dragon. So for me, it's like never losing the sight of your roots and where you come from. So it's sort of paying homage to a generation and a half ago that really, really broke the trail, so to speak, to provide the opportunity of where I'm at now. So it's to that old guard that I always keep mentioning that in my daily life working with snow.
Yeah, and let me just say,
that's wonderful. I love how that all comes together.
Yeah, it's full circle.
Let me just say one more thing. Is the book is not a how-to guide or anything like that. There's lots of wonderful books about backcountry skiing and avalanche awareness that have been written around that subject matter, techniques and all that sort of thing. I really wanted to approach it as a storytelling book about people and about dramatic stories that had happened in their lives around avalanches and around backcountry skiing. So that was the intent.
And let me add too, I think the reason that both Ed and I had a great connection, and why Ed connected so well with the characters and the vignettes and the stories in the book, is that I said it at the beginning. I mean, like soul surfers, right? And I think we made that connection early on, that we were both water people, we were both physical surfers, surfing in the ocean. And there's a certain lifestyle where you realize, like, these are very genuine people, and they have given themselves to their communities. They've invested a lot of themselves. They've given a lot back to their communities. And, this is, it's such a beautifully written book, and it's so genuine and it's so sincere. And I think, Ed, that's why we initially connected, because it seems so genuine. And I think Ed was able to bring that with the interviews, and then also deliver that in the book. So I think you're going to see a level of writing and sincerity and truth and honesty. I mean, this, like you said, this is not a how-to book. This is the people that make this all happen.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, thank you so much. And then to round us off, I just wanted to ask both of you, are you working on any other projects right now? I mean, this was a pretty hefty project in and of itself.
I keep getting that question from friends and other people. The answer really is no right now, because it took 3.5 years to write the book, and I'm trying to be honest and loyal to the book in terms of going out and doing events like this, and then we have a number of those things scheduled through the end of the year, and even a couple taking shape for the beginning of next year. So I'm trying to devote most of my time in terms of the writing, so to speak, to these sorts of things. And you know, I lived with this book for 3.5 years, so I don't want to walk away from it too quickly.
It's like Ed saying, this is a long-term relationship.
But having said that, you know, I'm a writer, and I would love to maybe do something else, and I've got a few things I'm sort of kicking around ideas about, but not seriously right at this minute. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, thank you both so much for taking the time to chat with us today. I really appreciate it. This was wonderful. Again, the book is Dragons in the Snow. You can buy this from us, Weller Bookworks in Trolley Square. Yeah, is there anything that either of you would like to say to
Just that we appreciate your support, and
close?
I have a special place in my heart for bookstores, and particularly in the wonderful independent bookstores, and I know Weller is one of those. So we thank you again for your help.
Yeah, thanks for all of this support. Buy early, buy often. Support your independent bookstore.
Yeah.
It's such a vital way to transfer information. It's so cerebral. It's such a wonderful thing that you're doing at your bookstore. So keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, this was wonderful. I hope you both have a great rest of your evening. And thank you to our Facebook audience as well for tuning in today.
You bet. Thanks for having us. Peace be with you.
Bye.